Oh, dude. Last episode had all the spectacle. This episode might be my sneaky fave. There are some really creative and interesting things going on in this one. And where it ended. That's where I'm at right now. What's up, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. I'm not even doing things right. I was like, I'm the Seaman. I'm just doing this for no reason. This last episode, we're not going to waste any time. You see the hat, the shirt. Pull up a chair, man. Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in to episode number 4 of season 2 of The Boys, entitled Nothing Like It in the World. And you might just be able to say that about this episode. I really dug this. I'm not gonna lie, this episode doesn't have like a ton of laughs, doesn't have like a ton of like big shocking moments, although it certainly does give you a few of those. And if you would like a little spoiler action before we dive in spoiler free, check out my reactions from the episode now. Can't be going. Stormfront doesn't live in the suburbs? Forest? This isn't her place. Where is he?
There you are.
That's not. Oh! How? What?
I wasn't worried.
But we.
I've missed you so much.
Lost.
Are you thirsty?
Oh, the two of them are so gross.
Change back.
Oh no! Oh, I forgot about that.
Change the fuck back. Now, doppelganger.
Fuck you! You Guillermo broke my fucking heart. You've got
Hey, this ain't a little Vegas road trip, okay? You only know no date either. Shit, all over your skin. You lose well, I understand.
Just carry these around with you.
Oh! What the?
That's liberty.
What?
How much?
Oh, that's so weird.
I suck your cock so fucking hard.
Oh, it's so weird. And he's so into it.
I don't need you.
Oh! So is that like a... I don't need... I'm so confused at what he really meant there. I think it's the death of the old Homelander. Oh, fuck. That's dark. Like, the biggest reaction for me on that whole episode was just, wait, did what I just think happened? Just this, then I just first, you know what we're gonna do? I'm like, Homelander's got me all like frazzled. I want to give a massive shout out to Eric Kripke, the showrunner and creator of The Boys for Amazon, and like I am just in awe of the way this show is able to tackle so many different things that can relate to so many different people with so many real life issues that are going on in the world, and the way they're able to do it just simply. I mean, within an image. Like this last episode, we literally touch on like whitewashing in Hollywood and representation in general, which is something that we've been dealing with almost every episode. but they, it's been a lot of the female representation. They definitely get into the race aspect a little bit in this episode. Uh, Conversation about like the Confederate flag, and it's not even a conversation that's had in the show. It's something you see, and it just makes you go, "Look at what that's saying." And they just like continue to just find all these ways to talk about all these different things and put it into a show that doesn't feel jumbled or messed, man. Like, this is very, very the opposite of a jumbled mess, man. This thing is so tight, and the writing and the storytelling is so good that like you're really, really like engrossed in the story that's going on with all the characters and what the story of The Boys season 2 is. Yet simultaneously, you're having so many conversations about so many different things. And just the way they can do it, like I said, simplistically, and just an image or a one-liner here and there, it's just super, super impressive every episode I watch. And you got to just give out the shout-outs to Eric Kripke and the team that he's assembled here to just creatively get this thing rolling every episode. And like I said, this might be my favorite, because aside from just touching on all these different issues that exist in the world and kind of looking at them through the prism of The Boys, this episode writing was it was so good, man. Like, you want textbook, like really like strong storytelling, watch what you get in The Boys episode 4 of season 2, man. You watch these two characters that through 3 episodes have been at odds with each other. Butcher and Huey. What Butcher did and where that left Huey has really rubbed Huey the wrong way. We talked about how he's kind of been imploding. And the way that Huey has responded has kind of just been like, well, this is a distraction from what I need to do, so Butcher doesn't even care. And we've been watching these two guys that were one of the main reasons you fell in love with the show, was watching those two interact in season 1 at completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And in episode 4, they are separated from each other the whole episode, yet their stories are just a mirror image. Like, you're watching two guys go through the exact same situations in 2 completely different ways. And like, you just sit there and you go, huh, that's funny. Like, that just happened to that guy. And then you're like, later on, you're like, and that just, wow. Like, you just had a really, really impactful episode for Huey and Butcher. And both stemming from their personal lives, not from their mission, of trying to stop Vought. Like, some of that is in there, and things that have to do with Vought are weaved in there, and can create some issues for both of them in the situations that they're in. But you watch these two guys go through this experience in 2 different ways, and they've been at odds with each other, that by the time you get to the end of the episode for The Boys, you feel like there might be a coming together of sorts, because what else are you possibly going to do? And I loved everything we got. I mean, Jack Quaid and friggin' Carl Urban are just so good that, like, you're just fully engrossed in watching both of their stories and watching these really, really, like, nice things happen to them. The stuff that's going on with Huey, spoilers. The things going on with Huey have to do with Starlight, and the things going on with Butcher have to do with his, trying to find his wife. And like, you get these really like wonderful moments with Huey and Starlight a couple times, and I don't want to spoil anything with Butcher, but you get some real nice moments in what's going on in his story in this episode. And then they both have to deal with the opposite end of those spectrums. And just watching how that story kind of unfolded for both of them and the ways in which it did, you were like, that's not where I thought we were going to end up. And I think both of them being where they now are could be driving them together. Now, on top of that, we get a little bit, we want to make sure we cover all the boys. We get a little bit of action with Kimiko, dealing with the effects of the end of episode 3, as is Frenchie, and they have a moment where, one person's thinking, this is one of those things I love about this relationship between Kimiko and Frenchie, is because they can't directly communicate with each other, there's a lot of like, I think this is where we're at, and typically with them, one is one place and one is the other place, and that happens here. So we get like a little bit of that and a little bit more with Frenchie afterwards. But outside of that, this episode really does focus on Huey and Butcher, and then Mother's Milk is just kind of like smack dab in the middle, specifically with Huey's story. They're kind of like on this like mission that they have to go on. But weaved in with that mission, we get some really good Mother's Milk stuff, man. He has a really excellent sequence with Starlight at a diner that I love. Like, just the whole back and forth, I was like, so good, man. Like, and you get to learn about both of them simultaneously. And then kind of like to the conclusion of what their mission is, Mother's Milk kind of steps in and leads the conversation that's happening. And we learn more about his background and his history. And things that we've had hinted at are now clear. There's literally a moment where he was like, I didn't know that story about you. And us, the audience, we know there was something there, but we didn't know exactly what the story is. So we kind of get clarity on some stuff with Mother's Milk. That I was like, I really liked the way that beat was delivered, the way that beat was able to be delivered within the context of the story, because what Mother's Milk is doing in telling the story that he tells and kind of gives us an insight into his background is helping advance the story of the episode and the season. And the thing that they're dealing with, the reveal in that was like, oh, and all of it, again, just a lot of shifting perspectives in this episode. And as we shift our perspective over to the other side of that good and bad line, and we talk about the 7, it's a real low-key episode for most of the 7. There's some interesting stuff going on with the Deep that you don't exactly understand until you get toward like the end of the episode. There's something like the whole episode, you're like, what does any of this have to do? Like, there are things you see and you're just kind of confused. There's clarity by the time you get to the end. It's kind of playing into things that are going on with the Deep, and I feel it coming. There's gonna be, we've already had some pretty good Deep episodes, but I feel like there is an episode coming where you're just gonna be like, get the curtain pulled back completely, like for us and for the Deep, on like the group that he's kind of interacting with and what they're really trying to get at. But real small story beats for him. There's a small amount of screen time for Queen Maeve, really big story beat. And the way that that's handled, again, is one of those things that kind of talks about some issues that in general exist in the world, and put it through the context and prism of the boys, and allows for a very interesting interaction between Queen Maeve and Homelander. And the tension between everybody and Homelander throughout this whole episode, we're going to talk about him in a minute, is really interesting to watch, because he's at a very vulnerable place, and I think he might be in an even different kind of vulnerable place than where I thought he was after episode 3. Like I said, we'll get to Homelander. But the story beat with Queen Maeve, I thought was very interesting. And I'll be interested to see what the fallout is from that. There's a lot of fallout going on with people that, Homelander is interacting with. But small beat for her. Like I said, Starlight, her story is kind of intertwined with Huey's. And, like we said, got that wonderful bit with Mother's Milk in her. There is another moment that, happens in and around that diner scene. Where like you really understand at the core who Starlight is, and the fact that situations continue to just dictate her away from her gut instincts. And she also has a brush up with Homelander that is super tense. It's probably the most tense interaction that Homelander has with anybody until the end of the episode. I told you, we're getting to Homelander. But it's, again, one of those situations where you really feel how scary he is, and you really see how smart Starlight is. Like, she is at her wit's end to a degree and is not safe, but she keeps figuring out, like, on the fly, ways to get out of the situations that she's put in. And watching her do it has just been really, really fun. Erin Moriarty is just crushing, specifically the last couple episodes. Like, the things they're asking her to do with Starlight this year are fun. And not necessarily for the character, but I think for the actor, I think the stuff that they're asking Moriarty to do, it's allowing her to flex a lot of different acting muscles, and show off that she can do a bunch of different things. And so far, everything they've asked her to do has been really, really good. Black Noir, he's super mysterious. And anytime he shows up on screen, I'm just like, I'm interested because I know nothing about you. I mean, we've learned a few things this season, but I'm just, because he doesn't speak, and he's just always suited up where you can't see any aspect of him. I'm just always intrigued by that character, and you're starting to see in this episode where he might be trying to head, or what his current goal in life is as a member of the Seven. And that hopefully will lead to some interesting stuff for episode 5. I would love a much bigger episode for Black Noir, because the little bits that we've gotten from him this year, I'm like, this character's really interesting. I want to know more. So that's pretty much your main roster of the 7. Now, almost all of the shoot, man. The 7. There's so many people in the 7. There's 7 people. A-Train. We do get a little bit of A-Train, and very, very interesting. It was one of those things where, like, off the cuff, I wasn't expecting it, and then when like something else happens, like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense with what's been going on. And where we leave off with A-Train, things could be different by the next time we see A-Train because of things that go on in the episode. But he's gonna be kind of at odds with, shocking, Homelander. I'm telling you, everybody in the 7, except Black Noir, I guess, because he's just doing his own thing, is kind of at odds with Homelander. And of course, my favorite character of the season thus far, Miss Aya Cash's Stormfront, is of course also at odds with Homelander. And they're like on a collision course, like throwdown. And we get a little bit of Stormfront. She's still kind of doing her thing. We learned some interesting things about Stormfront. This is one of these episodes, man, like I said, sneaky good, because the reveals are like, oh wow, that interest, and like just, oh man, like I said, this is the episode where I'm gonna just continually praise Eric Kripke, because I loved what they were doing from a storytelling standpoint this time, and I love what they're doing with the character of Stormfront. Like, get to see her show off a little bit more. And then we get a really tense interaction between her and Homelander. Like I said, every interaction with Homelander this episode is tense. And I was hoping for throwdown time. Spoilers, not quite yet. But the conversation they have, you just see 2 actors in Aya Cash and Anthony Starr that are just, whoo, like, for me, they have been the 2 best so far this season. They are just knocking everything out of the ballpark. And when it comes to Homelander, his story is just getting more complex and more interesting by the minute. At the end of episode 3, I was like, you know what? Like, this guy seems to be putting on this front like he wants a family, but like in the back of your head, it's like he just wants another him to help. Like if there's 2 of them, and that's what I think his motivations were. Although by the end of that episode, I was kind of muddied in that. I was like, maybe he really is. And then this episode, you're kind of like, yeah, maybe he really does want a family. And then he kind of, does what Homelander does and starts to assert control. And then again, you're like, what is the driving force for Homelander right now? Like, does he want to bring everybody back together? Does he just want to be the guy who's in charge and has this team and like owns something? Or is it all really just about him and the fact that he maybe doesn't need anybody but himself? And a lot of that concept and idea gets flushed out in this episode. Like I said, you're kind of swinging and flowing with where Homelander is going, because he is extremely vulnerable, and he's been vulnerable since the end of season 1, and you get to see that vulnerability play out in what might be the best sequence of The Boys yet. The way this episode ends, you will just sit there and go, it's pretty straightforward with what you're watching. There's an interesting character that's interacting with Homelander this episode, and it does cause a couple of surprises for us. And some head-scratching moments where you're like, what is going on here? But what goes down at the end of the episode just makes you go, I don't even think we've seen like the surface scratched on where Homelander can go and how evil this guy can be. Like, he's scary. And like I said, he's got a lot of tense moments throughout the whole episode, but the final tense moment that you get shows you probably the most terrifying version of Homelander yet. And if what happened at the end of that episode is what I think happened and means specifically to Homelander, he's about to get a lot scarier. And I just love what Anthony Starr is doing with it, man. Like, it is a deep episode for Homelander's character, specifically when you get, like, it is a real deep thing, man. Like, and when you think about, like, what that means from the emotional standpoint of Homelander's character, whoo, there is some, I tweeted this out, man, it's gonna get effing diabolical this season. I am, like, ecstatic at, like, where we could be going as we approach Friday. So I am all caught up with the boys. Finally, I've overcome the move and the loss of internet, and I am caught up, ready for this Friday's episode drop. Like I said, I think this might be my sneaky favorite episode of the season so far. I love good storytelling, and the storytelling that's going on in this episode. Doing some really cool things, man. Like I said, the shout outs to Eric Kripke and the creative team that he has working on this bad boy this year. They can't stop, man, because this one, got me good. So there you go, man. Those are all my non-spoiler thoughts on episode 4 of season 2 of The Boys. Nothing like it in the world. My sneaky fave so far. Now I know what you're thinking. Like I said, this episode is kind of more in line, maybe more in line with episode 2, where it's not like a ton, although episode 2 is hysterical. You get a little bit of humor, you get a little bit of shock treatment, but most of this is about really good storytelling. So did that work for you, or did you want to see more big things? You want to see some soups throw down? Because there are a couple times where you think they might, and then, you kind of go different directions. So did that work for you this episode? Did you want to see more things that made you go ooh and ah? Or did you really dig what they were getting at story-wise, specifically for Butcher, Huey, and Homelander? So anything you're thinking about episode 4 goes down below in the comments section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man and join his C-Maniacs as we watch The Boys week by week here, jump over there, show a little love to us, and support by hitting that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I have been the C-Man. I am signing off. Peace. Well, oh, B, you guys are still here? You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry, C-Man's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy. And if you haven't yet, and you want to come check out all the C-Man goodies, join the Cinema Sit Down Squad, man. Hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the little bell down below that, too, so you can get alerts every time I make new videos.